back to Leaders Recon. I'm Captain Carney, and today we have a fantastic episode that I'm very excited about. And we're speaking with Chief Young with the G357 SIG. And first of all, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be back.
Absolutely. So that was the first thing I wanted to bring up was now you're no longer a host, you are the interviewee. So does that feel weird, different?
Well, it was just one podcast I did, so it wasn't like I was fully into the system. But it just feels nice to be back, and especially with how far the podcast has come since then.
Absolutely. I think so. You did the interview with Staff Sergeant Smiley as which episode was it?
I think that was episode 1. But with it, that was a great experience. You want to talk about somebody with a ton of drive, and finished Ranger School, which I've never even attempted to do. So that right there, she's already just well surpassed me when it comes to Army experiences.
Absolutely. So you you were on the team and then you went for a deployment, is that correct?
Yes.
And now you're back, so you're working in the G357 SIG Synchronization Integration Group. It's like process improvement, quality control, but you're about to go to the G2.
Yes. So right now, one of the main things we do over there in the G357 is making sure everything's good for General Davis, and also ensure that guidance, directions, taskings are making it to the 5 and 3, and also feeding back up and then going out to the force at large.
Excellent. So what we're going to be discussing today is intelligence on the battlefield. And so I'm excited to talk about that because that's both of our branches. So going from a tactical level, and now we're working up at NGB, we get more of an operational, strategic look. So as we're getting started with the podcast, when people think of intel, you know, there's a really good meme where it's like what my parents think I do, what soldiers think I do, etc. And then at the end of it, it says what I actually do, and there's a photo of PowerPoint. And so, I've even seen tabs that are PowerPoint Ranger or something like that. But to give the audience an overview, Army intelligence, what is it? What do we do?
It's PowerPoint. No, but seriously, unfortunately, it is a lot of making briefs and digital stuff to share and synthesize data. But it's not all hiding in parents' basements, staring at screens, downing a ton of energy drinks, and just searching one magic database that has all the answers like you see in some TV show, or just solving all the problems within a 24-hour period, or just one individual who's able to stop all the nukes and the enemy war and pure cataclysmic failure of the world as we know it.
You mean we're not super detectives?
No.
Okay.
No, we are definitely not that, and it's not as exciting as the movies can portray it, but it's also a lot more rewarding and potentially more dynamic than what sometimes can be portrayed in a TV show or a movie or any of the other aspects to that, in the form of the environment's always changing, and it's always complex. It is never simple. Just look at what's going on in Ukraine right now with that conflict. Every day, throughout the day, the situation is evolving from who is where, who is doing what, how are they doing it, why are they doing it, why are they doing it there, why are they doing it now, why are they doing it with that group. And it's, for the most part, sifting through a ton of information to try to find trends, to try to find answers, to try to answer questions from your commander, or even trying to answer questions that you think your commander may have, and you're just doing anticipation. And you're doing that for the hopes of, one, in a large-scale combat operation, trying to find the information or trying to find that key piece to destroy the enemy before they're able to engage with you. For coin, it's doing everything you can to figure out how to get the populace on your side, to marginalize the threat networks, and to get to a steady state environment.
For the audience, what does an IBCT normally look like as far as force structure with manning and analysts and things like that? You start with the S2 shop, and then you go down to the battalions. They have S2 shops. What does a MICO look like?
So for a MICO, it's just a traditional company-sized element full of analysts, humidors, signers, and a couple of officers, some senior enlisted. But for the most part, it's a group of soldiers who get work like crazy come MDMP time or CTC time and spread to the winds, each with a variety of tasks that need to accomplish with. And for the most part, all those tasks need to be accomplished a couple of hours ago. So yeah, that's pretty much the basic gist of the MICO. And with it, a ton of assets, a ton of tools, and a ton of people that are just out for, one, ensuring the survivability of the unit and adding to the lethality of a BCT, especially as we transition away from coin type scenarios and deployments into more LISCO, large scale combat operations.
So for those of us that aren't, or for the individuals who aren't Intel, we should probably explain some of the acronyms that we're using. So a MICO, Military Intelligence Company. What are some of the MOSs that people will generally interact with in a MICO or an S2 shop? It's 35 series, 350s for chiefs, still 35s for officers, so like 35 Alpha is mine. What are some of those key MOSs?
Well, they're all key.
Absolutely.
Just to do the political route for that one. But with it, it's hard to say which one is more important. They all perform a niche role that goes into the overall understanding of a combat environment, operations, and so forth. And with it, it all comes together with the 35 Foxes and the 350 Foxes and the 35 Alphas, who are your all-source folks, or from the officer's side, the 35 Alpha is just your standard, and I use that term loosely, nobody get upset over that one, just your intelligence officer. Then the 350 Fox, the all-source intelligence technician, like what I am, and the 35 Fox, the all-source intelligence analyst, which is the enlisted MOS. And they're taking in all this information that's coming in from the individual ints, from outside elements, from higher, from lower, trying to bring this all together, make sense of it, pull out the so whats, try to identify indicators of warnings, and push that one to the commanders so they can make decisions. Push it out to neighboring units so they can be aware and prepare for any other kind of enemy events that could be heading their way, and push it up to higher so that way they can truly understand the situation that unit that the analysts are in are experiencing, because that could broaden the understanding of what's going on throughout the battle space as a whole. So it's all interlocked with information and communication and a lot of synchronization, all done at a very rapid pace, especially, again, like I mentioned before, large-scale combat operations where things are just churning and burning nonstop. The battlefield is ever-changing at the second, and it's a lot of information that has to be worked, and that takes people to look at it.
Absolutely. So I'm glad that you mentioned the battlefield, because with your deployment that you just went through, I was curious, what are some things that you've seen that have gone well in an S2 shop as far as good TTPs whenever you were deployed, or any of your deployments?
I will say one of probably the biggest keys for success is relationships. And with that one, it's truly kind of coming together as a team internally, so that internal relationship within your S2 shop. But also it's about escaping your fenced-in location and walking down the road to go talk to the other units, the other nations that are there. As we've all experienced with any kind of deployments, both during global war and terror and other locations, you're rarely ever deploying to a location where you are the sole unit at a spot. We're continuously operating in a joint environment, and that requires us being able to go talk to foreign nations or other services in order to go and really work through intelligence issues and problems.
So that brings up an excellent point in my mind, which is when I was in Afghanistan, something that we had to know how to do was declassifying information. And so that speaks perfectly to relationships and partnerships is mitigating stovepiping, or the funnel.
Stovepipes of excellence.
Absolutely. So like in my case, we had so much trouble making things REL-RISMA, Resolute Support Mission Afghanistan, and so like getting things to the ANA, ANP, etc. So with let's see, what are the best ways to ensure that you can transfer that knowledge outside of your organization? Like you can get up and go talk to people, but like I guess maintaining relationships would be good in a schoolhouse environment or a deployed environment. Where do you find those relationships?
Well, kind of talking on your first point about the classification aspect, with it, any good shop, and this goes beyond the intel realm, it goes into the S3 operations, 4, the 6, and so forth, who all have their own systems and information in the report. It's crucial that everyone has their security classification guides.
Mm-hmm.
And that right there is the basis for any of your classifying and ensuring that you're writing for release. So you can be a good partner within these joint environments and being able to share as much as you can, as fast as you can. And the best way to do that is doing it at the reporting piece as opposed to maybe going a little bit farther on. Then the second aspect to that is having well-trained foreign disclosure representatives and foreign disclosure officers who know the classification guides and know any of the local rules and governance that's guiding those operations. So it just is another layer, one, to ensure that items are at the right classification before they go out, and two, just to kind of a CYA, just to make sure the right things are going out and you're not overclassifying, or an underclassified item isn't going out and potentially causing damage. So that's probably touching on the two things. And then the third point, we were talking about relationships. With it, it's one, not always coming to another unit asking for things, not always going, hey, can you give me this? But instead going with them, hey, I've got this piece of information. Or in a deployed environment where morale is key, it could also mean just inviting them over to your unit's area for a barbecue if you have those amenities, or just sharing on any of the care boxes that come in from back in the States, and just sharing some snacks or magazines or whatever else, just trying to move the relationship from a purely professional to more of even a friendship. And it just pays off in dividends, especially deployed.
So it's good that we're talking about building those relationships. Where do you tend to find those relationships or build up that, the Rolodex of personnel that you tend to meet throughout your career?
Well, probably the key location is any of the professional military education that we go to. AIT, all the NCOES stuff for the enlisted side, or OBC, or Warrant Officer Basic Course, Warrant Officer Advanced Course, or any of the other schools you go to. The people that you meet, they can be an invaluable asset later on, both stateside when you're just doing a regular traditional drilling 1 week at a month, 2 weeks a year, and you're trying to get some good training aids for your own unit, so you may reach out to one of your active duty friends who has some great products. So you pull that in, or you're challenged with a situation that you've heard one of your other friends talk about or may kind of fit within their wheelhouse based on the unit that they're in, and you reach out to them, and vice versa. You'll have people reach out to you for that. So that just those friendships that you establish in the school is invaluable. And then one level above that, the actual administrators at those schoolhouses, those are really important, especially as you start working your way up in the ranks and becoming a leader, and you're trying to get a soldier into a school with limited seats or any of the other things that we come across as a soldier. And being able to call, for instance, Fort Huachuca and be like, hey, I have a soldier, I'm trying to get into a course. I'm showing that all these classes are full. However, we have a deployment coming up and we really need to get this person trained. Doing that phone call and having that link, it can make the difference between having a soldier that's trained to where they can have the proper authorities to do a task versus going downrange and not being truly fully functional. And the schoolhouse will, for the most part, always work with you, especially when there are those circumstances where it's a deployment, where real life situations or real life repercussions can come if a soldier can't get into the class.
Okay, so if a commander was looking at a deployment, but instead of waiting for the notification of the deployment and trying to get people in rushedly through the course, what obviously training for MI soldiers takes a little bit longer than the average soldier. So what does a good tempo look like? What would you recommend for commanders?
Well, the big buzzword now is rearm. So that's the new cycle for all units are supposed to be going through for modernization, training, and going into their ready year for deployment. So with it, it really takes a section to go and look at that period from deployment to deployment and create a deliberate schedule for their soldiers. So that way you're breaking that training up over multiple years, and even having one training event feed into another training event, and then have it to where your soldiers are, for the most part, available for an XCTC, warfighter, a CTC, or a deployment. So it does take some deliberate planning, where you sit down and you go through the months, you go through your drill days, you bring up ATARs, and you're planning out the paths for the various MOSs and soldiers. Because as you said, a lot of our schools are not short. It's not a send them away for 2 weeks and they come back. For some of those schools, it's send them away for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. If it's a language school, you're looking at a year potentially. And while it hurts having them gone for that long, whatever the soldier and their MOS, it hurts more when you're going into a deployment and that soldier is not properly trained to do their job. So you really got to look at that. And as an intelligence soldier, we also need to be able to go and voice that concern to the command and let them understand that we can't just go 1 month out from a deployment and get everyone fully trained on all of our tasks. Or for some of the things, you can't even go the year of you're supposed to deploy and get everyone fully trained. So it's a two-part thing. One, your commander understanding the requirements, and two, you as an intelligence soldier in your section mapping out the path.
Okay, and so we've heard of this Foundry, and so I want to touch on that as far as a tool for the commander. Maybe funding is running low or something like that. How should people approach using Foundry?
So Foundry, with it's a really good opportunity to offset the cost of certain schools off of a unit and onto a separate budget that's already guaranteed for intelligence training. And with it, the best thing you can do is truly understanding who the foundry manager is for that state, and from there doing those engagements to see what their funds do look like, and try to identify any of the training that's available through those funds. And it can vary. I'm not an expert on it, so I can't speak entirely on it or at that higher level with authority on a lot of the things, but it's a really good tool that's at the disposal of units that sometimes just gets missed, or because of improper planning, there's just not times to schedule when you need to schedule.
Okay. So with soldiers going to the schoolhouse, they get trained up doctrinally. Whenever they're not in the schoolhouse, what are some ways that they can maintain their schoolhouse proficiencies or the skills that they've gone through?
Yeah, and that one can be really tough, especially on a drill weekend and the nature of the work that we do. So with that, you're looking at trying to find various creative ways to maintain your proficiency on your skills. With that, it could mean breaking out some 1 to 50,000 maps and some acetate and some markers and going through IPB process as part of the military decision-making process, really going through those aspects. Or even breaking out the various steps of the military decision-making process and go, for this drill, we are going to focus on the first couple of steps to mission analysis. Or we are going to focus on COA development, and we're going to break out the FMs, we're going to break out the ADPs, ADRPs, whatever else, the smart books that are readily available in the PX or wherever else online. And you're going to go nice and deliberate and slow and truly make sure that all the soldiers understand, here's what our collective task is as a section. Here's what your role is as a soldier during this phase. Here's your task, your purpose. Here's your end state. And here's the product, the baseline product that we hope to see at the end of it. Just so that way you can get those sets and reps in. For the various other intelligence soldiers, it can be really rough to try to get that M-Day training in. And then kind of talking with before, taking a deliberate approach for it, it could mean scheduling time for various soldiers of certain MOSs to go to another training site where they do have access to reporting or the kind of buildings that they need to conduct their training in. Mm-hmm. So it can be rough. We're going to be out these soldiers for this drill, but again, just as with most training, it's better to go through that burden now while it's still training versus going through and experiencing that discomfort later on at CTC or deployment where the soldiers are not properly trained for it.
So I'm glad you mentioned the regs and the breaking them open and the difficulties at CTC. So I'm sure one of the hardships that a lot of intel soldiers have faced is the speaking ops, talking ops with people in the 3 shop, etc. Mm-hmm. Have you experienced anything like that, and how have you overcome it?
So with it, the best way to overcome it is to actually read doctrine. And I know it's really exciting, a lot of cliffhangers. It's something that you just don't want to put down late at night when you're trying to go to sleep. It can keep you up for hours. But with it, doing a little bit of reading each day and kind of getting through the material and understanding the proper verbiage for the events that you're trying to describe is really important. As an intel soldier, you are directly working with the operations folks. And operations folks speak a certain way, and that certain way is how we're all supposed to talk. As Sergeant Heft mentioned in your 3-minute doctrine series, going through the types of defenses. there's specific terms for specific types of defenses, and that's meant to remove the ambiguity of what you're trying to describe. So being on the same page, using that proper verbiage, removes the ambiguity, and also allows you to better vocalize what your analysis is. Yeah, so that way we're all speaking one common language instead of having to relearn or have a translator.
So once everyone's speaking the same language, what are some of the value adds that an Intel soldier can provide to the people in the 3 shop as far as like perhaps a different perspective or they're looking at it a different way?
So with it, the value add, that's a long list. Because with it, you're now, as the Intel soldier who is meant to look at things from the enemy perspective, you're providing advice on friendly operations or going and saying, hey, within the capabilities of how the enemy operates and how they're able to employ their force, we feel that this may be a better friendly COA for this operation or for this movement or for where a talk should be placed. And it's really beneficial and you're showing value added from the friendly side. And then from the enemy aspect, you're saying things speaking in their terms. We think the enemy is going to perform this kind of defense or this kind of offense, this kind of movement. And with that, they are going to be traveling at this speed, in this formation, and you're using the words that the S3 uses when he's talking or when they're talking to the commander on how your unit is going to operate. And it just really, really streamlines the communication, and it shows that you are a professional when it comes to understanding doctrine. And there's always some adjustments that need to be made towards doctrine, but it's that common language that we can all come around and truly understand.
Okay. So they've got the relationships, they are reading doctrine, they're speaking the right way, they're functioning well within their unit. So if now we can talk about growth. So what are some ways that soldiers can find broadening assignments or they're looking to expand their perspective and knowledge?
So with that, there's quite a few avenues that a soldier can go down. And one of the unique natures of our roles, too, is the fact that a lot of intelligence soldiers in the Army are also performing those kind of functions out in the private sector or for the government and so forth. So that's kind of a nice added value to these folks, and they're bringing that knowledge back. But staying just within uniform, some of the tools that they can utilize are things such as tour of duty, to go look for a Title 10 tour somewhere within CONUS, or there's even opportunities to go OCONUS into Europe to go man positions for a year, do their job every day, build those sets and reps of that role at that echelon that they can bring back. And they can also bring back formats for documents and SOPs and tax ops and planning SOPs that they can bring into their own unit to kind of evolve and make it better. So that's one of the really good tools that are available right now. Another thing is to look around, and even though they're starting to become a little bit more scarce, volunteering for deployments, whether it's units within their own state or looking at units from other states to fill those seats for going downrange. And I know no unit is going to turn away an intel soldier from a deployment, because usually always running short, and really highly trained, highly skilled individuals that bring a lot of value added on a deployment.
Absolutely. And so I kind of want to bring up a joke where it's, you may have heard it with being a CW3 in the intel field, but only the S2 can be successful while still being wrong 80% of the time. Have you ever heard that one?
Yeah, and I've heard all the references to like the weather, those weather personalities. Like but with that, there's a really good story I learned way back when, during my earlier days, and with it, definitely a Coinbase scenario. So with it, you've had 3 PXs that have blown up. One at Fort Hood, one at Fort Riley, and one at Fort Bliss. 3 days prior to each of those explosions, the same one individual flew into Killeen. 3 days later, the PX blew up. The same individual flew into Manhattan, Kansas. 3 days later, the PX at Fort Riley blows up. Same individual flew into Fort Bliss, or flew into El Paso, and 3 days later, Fort Bliss, the PX blows up. Well, now you get a report that that same individual just flew it to Fayetteville, North Carolina. What do you do as an intel soldier?
Better get ready.
Well, you go and you advise the command saying, we think you should elevate the threat. This individual, here's the trend that's occurred. We think there's a really high probability that the PX here at Fort Bragg is going to be targeted. And the command will go do it. You send out 100%, all the soldiers are full gear, they're out at the gates, they're dealing with the heat, they're checking photos and everything out for days and days, and nothing happens. Soldier on the ground is like, intel, you got it wrong. When in actuality, understanding the trend and everything else, that assessment to elevate the force posture went and deterred the threat. So we didn't capture the individual in this scenario, but at the same time, the PX also, there wasn't a successful attack. So it's a win, but at the same time, it looks like intel was wrong.
Right, exactly. So it's sort of a difficult ground that we play on as far as if we're right, then
even when you're right, you can be wrong.
Right.
So and you can still get blamed for it.
But I'm glad you mentioned, in advising the commander and things like that. So when it comes to things like guiding your intel with the commander's intent, how important is that? And I want to impart this to junior intel soldiers. How important is it to listen to the commander's intent? It's everything, but...
Well, the commander's intent is everything. It's the commander. It's the 6. They're the ones who guide everything. They're the ones ultimately responsible for making the decisions and the fallouts for the decisions that they make. So that commander's intent, and following it and listening to it and truly understanding, and maybe even going back and asking for clarification on certain things that you may not understand, is crucial to being an effective intelligence professional within a unit.
Okay.
And building off that and kind of touching on the early relationships deal, having a good relationship with your commander and vice versa, the commander having a good relationship with the intelligence shop, along with all the other shops, is also crucial. For instance, there's a really good book. It's called G2, General Patton's Intelligence. And with it, it's written by General Patton's former intelligence officer, the G2. And they lay out their entire intel campaign from Operation Torch, the invasion of North Africa, all the way to the end of the European campaign. And they go through on how much the working relationship between the G2 and General Patton just really allowed for the successes that we saw within Third Army and so forth as part of that campaign. And it should be something that a lot of intelligence professionals should read. There's a lot that can be taken away from it. But yeah, that relationship, it's important.
So when intel soldiers, like we were saying before, you get out of the schoolhouse maintaining those proficiencies, what advice would you give to soldiers for maintaining those proficiencies from drill to drill?
So for drill to drill, probably the biggest things they can do is, 1, stay abreast of what's going on in the world. truly look at things from an intelligence perspective, a unit perspective, as if I was to deploy there next week, what are some of the things that I should know about this environment? What are
The so what?
yeah, the so what's, the key players, like how do I think my unit would be able to operate in this? And what would I need to do as an intelligence soldier in order to better enable my unit to operate in an environment like that? There's going on and touching on the regs, reading the changes. There's various other platforms that they can go and look at for a little bit more shorter snippets of doctrine. For instance, you have the 3-minute doctrine series that y'all have here on Leaders Recon. There's various sites on social media, various personalities. For instance, there are some OCTs out of JRTC, just as an example, who have their own Instagram page. And they will go and post things from CTC rotations that are going on. For instance, they may have a rotational unit that's having an issue with moving into the box, moving into the training area within effective timelines. So they will go through and, yeah, there's usually a funny meme, but then as you go beyond it, they will actually highlight the FM, the ADP, or whatever that it's the instructions that a unit should be following to go and move into the box
So
or
they're really
do that movement to contact or whatever else that deliberate move. And it's really good information out there, and it's provided in a way where it doesn't take maybe but a couple of minutes to read through it to get a basic understanding and to kind of hopefully invigorate the soldier to go through and want to read more. And that's the same way with Intel. You just need to have the drive to want to be able to read more, do more, understand more, so that way when it comes time to where you got to execute, it's not learning as you go, building the plane in flight. Instead, you already have a really good understanding of what's going on and you can move forward.
Okay. So as we get closer towards the end of the podcast, I have 2 questions. One's a little bit different than what we normally ask. So I want to ask, from your deployment experience, did you have a favorite thing that you enjoyed watching over, like a sensor to shooter process, or Intel soldiers developing their assessment skills, or anything like that?
One, on the deployment, when you actually get to do the job 24/7, it's always a great experience to see how your soldiers kind of evolve over the deployment and move from that level 10 kind of approach where it's just news reporting, just providing facts without so what's, what does this mean, analysis, to the end of the deployment where they are just running and gunning on their own, going through and being self-starters and coming to you with, I just saw this report today and I wound up doing my own research and I built out this product. Do you want to check it out? And be like, yes, I would love to check that out and really look at it and provide them some advice, or even go, hey, I think this is something that we need to push in front of the Brigade 2, or something we need to push in front of command. Or if it's something that may not be within your own area of operations, go, I think we need to push this up to higher or to one of our partner forces, because this could be really beneficial to them. And that's really rewarding.
As a former S2, I would have loved if I would have my soldiers do briefs at drill and things like that, but in a deployed environment, like we would usually do, you'd run queries and then bring the reports back, and you'd have like a shift change brief. And but I would have loved if, they do research. So I had excellent analysts. They would bring ideas and things like that. So that's the end state, is get them spun up so they're bringing you the ideas instead of, pitching everything to them. So
Yeah.
The last question that I have is the one that we always ask, which is if you could go back 10 years and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
Buy Tesla. Outside of that, whew,
when did you become a chief? Like, what was that between enlisted to chief to like, what happened there? What was that timeline?
so I enlisted initially back in June of 2000, pre-global war on terror, and did my first deployment 2003, invasion of Iraq, then 2004-05, back in Baghdad, 07-08, back in Baghdad, 2010, back in Baghdad.
Recurring
And
theme.
yeah, can't escape the place. 11-12 as a contractor in Afghanistan. In 2017, support of OIR. And 18-19 over there again, support of OIR. And then just recently came home last October from another deployment in support of OIR. So I definitely have a lot of experience with the Iraq region, which it's been kind of interesting going back from seeing it evolve from the very beginning of our operations, like day one of the invasion all the way until last October. Going back, seeing sites over and over, seeing T-walls come down, and various aspects of that government change, and the lives of the people change, and for some for the better, some for the worse. There's still that ongoing threat, though, in the area.
So
But
from all of that, what kind of, well, sorry, keep going.
I was just going to say that, but it's been kind of it's been kind of a special experience for myself to be that involved in one area in a foreign nation for so many years. For hopefully, from my point of view, doing what I can to help improve it and make the area a little bit better.
Absolutely. So using your military experience, hopefully making the world a better place, implementing change. Okay, making things better.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of bad people out there. And not all bad people are like the ones from the movies where they wear the dark clothes and have the maniacal laugh and want to put laser beams on sharks. But some of them try to portray themselves as good people or as the hero in their own story when they're actually causing a lot of harm and discomfort and pain to a ton of other people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we have to stay informed and keep everybody else informed.
Yes.
So, well, Chief, it's been fantastic. I've enjoyed speaking about our own branch. So thank you very much for being on the show and coming back again. So
yeah, look forward to coming back.
Thank you.
If you would like more information on any of the topics discussed today, please visit our social media pages in the links below. Tune in to Leaders Recon over the next few weeks as we bring in today's leaders and pioneers to discuss their experiences, share their wisdom, and help you grow as a leader. If you like this episode of Leaders Recon, please don't forget to subscribe below and leave us a 5-star review. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.